Hey there, Max. Hope you're having a great day today. Is your video lesson. So here are two things I'm going to talk about. I'll talk about those two things, and inevitably you'll have questions about those things. And you can shoot a video back to me if you plan through them or ask me said questions, and I'll do my best to answer. So let's get to it. So I got your email, and it sounds like you picked up a copy of the Cage Rhythm book, which is awesome. It's a great book. We'll get a lot of mileage out of it. There's some books that I use that we like kind of dabble with a little bit. So for those, like you can just say the strumming one, for example, and the Cage one. Those are two great ones that you get a lot of miles. So you buy those obviously. If you're like me and you want to build a library of awesome guitar books, like all these these fundamental changes books, the Cage ones, you can't really go wrong with them. The theory book is great too. I use that. For the Cage one and strumming, I say like go ahead and get those because you're going to use them enough. The ones that we're going to talk about later on that connect with these books, then those I can just send you handouts. So anyway, I'm glad you picked that up. A long story, longer. So it sounds like things are coming along nicely with Cage. If you're already saying ask me questions about G form. So far, just kind of go through a checklist of things that we've had so far in terms of chord playing. Sort of this left-hand stuff is we have your E form, right? You have your C form, you have your A form, and then so that's three. And then your new question is about G form, which is this guy right here, which you kind of already knew down here. But if you want to use it with a bar up here, or you can do that. That's a little trickier when you use a short bar. And then that only leaves us really D form, and at that point we know all the Cage chords in one key. Now here's the danger with the book, and I've been known to do this. I've been known to take people's books away from them, not because I want to stifle your creativity or your quest for knowledge, which I thoroughly enjoy. Someone who gives me these great questions to ask and talk about such awesome topics that I love talking about. Is that it's as I told another student earlier this week, sometimes Icarus flies a little bit too close to the sun, and they try to do too many things, and then they inevitably crash and burn because it's like almost too many things to think about. So one role that I play with people is making sure that I'm giving correct portions of the material for you to digest. So with this one, once you're in all 5 Cage shapes, dude, that's a ton of stuff right there, and like the implications of that are vast. And how we can use this is vast, and it's actually nice for us to, once we get all 5 Cage chords down, is just kind of sit and chill and like let our food digest and go, okay, what are all the cool things that come with all this new knowledge? Because with music, sometimes getting a new chord shape like opens up the floodgates of creativity, which Cage has done for many people that I've taught. So once we get through D form, what we're going to do is we're going to pump the brakes a little bit and go, okay, what's all the cool stuff that we can do with this, and what are the implications of all this? Because it's not a matter of like reading the book, like say if you're reading War and Peace, and we're trying to get through the whole book, right? You might get through the first chapter of Cage and you go, okay, what can I do with all this stuff? And that's what we're gonna have to do, because everybody's this way, me included. When I was first learning this stuff, it was like, okay, learn the Cage, okay, now what do we do with it? So going through the G form, right? So the G form as a thing, this isn't as useful as a strumming chord. Where I do see it is stuff like this. Say the song Big Empty by Stone Temple Pilots, right? A grunge tune from the early mid-90s. They take that G shape, they move it around to start places that sound cool. That's one thing you can do with it. The other thing that you can do with these Cage chords is that you can part them out. You can divide them. And I think the G chord fits that bill really nicely, because when you learn this shape right here, like getting it on and off, right, it can be challenging and actually using it for something. Like, I'm not gonna play my A chord like that. Do I come across that? Like, occasionally. I can probably count on one hand how many times I've seen the G form in its full glory on the fretboard in a rock popular situation. Even in the classical world, classical music, I can't even think of an example where like a composer would do, you play a classical piece of music, this is like you putting all this down at the same time. So the useful part of it is getting the shape down and then dividing it. Off the top of my head, a song that does the divide is Rocky Mountain High by John Denver. Does that, the clavinet. He does that chord at the very top of it. So what you would do then is top 4 strings on a G chord like that right there. Other thing you can do is this is very useful for what are called arpeggios. When we get into solo playing or sweep picking, right, we'll do that kind of stuff. That's useful for there. More useful than that with the G form is playing the inner strings on strings 4, 3, 2. These are what are called inversions. So a chord is made up of 3 notes, right? Right, if we broke down each one of these K chords and like actually spelled out what notes in there, we're going to find 3 unique notes. And if you look in your circle of fifths, the hand that I gave you that one time, if I didn't give that to you, make sure you message me and I'll send it to you. It has the 3 notes for the G chord. And those 3 notes, right, if you have those 3 notes played together, that's a G chord, right? And if you change up their order, so G, B, and D are the names of the notes that are in a G chord. And if you start flipping around which one's on bottom, right, so then D, so say if I have my G chord, right, G, B, D, right? And if I go, okay, now on this next flip of the chord of the notes, B is gonna be on the bottom, D is gonna be here, G is gonna be here. We flip that again, okay, now we're gonna make D on the bottom, right? We change the order of the notes. That's what's called an inverted chord. We inverted the notes. An inversion is what it's called. And what you can do to make a strumming song more interesting, not easy, interesting, is that you can take a cage chord, say for example E form, right? Okay, I don't want to play this big chunky chord because that gets old after a while. I want to play the inner 4 strings, or say inner 3 strings. String 4, string 3, string 2. And I'm going to finger it in such a way that those fingers are free. Hey, look at that. So what happens a lot of times is I'll pick a G chord. Then I'll go to the C form chord. Like I said, you're gonna see people playing it this way sometimes, like the John Mayers of the world, like they do like. I'm sure Neon does something like that. When John Mayer's big into that kind of stuff. He studied over at Berkeley. He studied at Berkeley College of Music in Massachusetts. So his teacher, I can't remember the name of his teacher, but big cage player. So John Mayer does this stuff, right? Then John Frusciante, who studied at GIT, he's turned on to this concept. So he does this stuff. And so say, for example, I got my C form right here, right? Rather than playing the big chunky chord, I'm just going to play strings 4, 3, and 2 and get rid of everything else. So I have my E form like this, right? Then I have my G form. E form, G form. And I might just stay there for a bit. So I might be playing in the key of G. And then same thing for the G form. I might not play the big chunky chord, it just shows me where everything is. The magic of cage is not in the big shape, it's in the inversions of this. Strings 4, 3, and 2, so rather than doing the big chunky chord, look at that, right? Back home bass. And D form is really an afterthought. D form is useful for this, but we'll talk about that another day. Going crazy with it. The idea, the first level of this, of doing inverted chords or dividing the big shape into smaller little pieces, is doing one string group. So what you want to do is go, okay, I'm not going to worry about like all the different permutations of this all for the part, because if you did that, you get bogged down and you get overwhelmed with all the possibilities. I got to limit myself when I do this stuff, because if I think of all the things that I can do, it's almost like I'm trying to like throw everything all at once at one example. So what I would do then in this is like, okay, I'm going to stay on strings 4, 3, 2, because that's the most useful, I think, for someone starting out this concept. Is like, okay, I have my E form shape right here, okay? My C form shape right there. I'm not doing that, but I'm doing this. So I'm doing a song where I go G, C, First thing is be able to do it in one key, one chord across the fretboard. Then after you do that, the next step will be, okay, I'm going to do these cage chords. Once I'm fluent with that, you got to be real fluent with them. So I got to be like, hey man, play up the fretboard with all your cage chords in G, and you just got to be like, okay, bam, 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 and then back to bam again, right? You should be able to do that very quickly. Then you do a different chord, okay, that's where we do a C chord, and that's where you get into stuff like this. So G chord, C. That sounds familiar to you. Really what that is, and I think I mentioned in the previous video, is that's what all the singer-songwriters are doing. That might be a beautiful intro for... Right? What I did though, I learned all my cage chords in the common keys, you know, G, C, D, E minor, A minor. You know, if you get those down, man, you can go all the fretboard, you can do all kinds of cool stuff. That's what's Hendrix doing with these, like. So at any rate though, what I want you to do is I want you to divide the chord on strings 4, 3, and 2, and that's what gives us inversions. Now, if you want to understand what inversions are on a deeper level and be able to spell them, the next thing you would do is start understanding this. Now, I usually save this when someone can do all 5 pentatonic shapes, can spell pentatonics, knows relative major, relative minor, and can do their cage chords respectively well, or understands the concept of cage. And in this one here, you start learning fretboard theory, right? Okay, how you spell scales, and then, because there's no point in learning that until you can at least do pentatonics on the fretboard. Segueing into that is, so do that for me, then compare with this G chord right here, G form, I want you to compare it to E minor pentatonic boxed 1. I've written that out for you, and I've sent it over to you in this video. Where is it? Where I've written out G form bar, and then I've written out E minor pentatonic. And I want you to compare those two, and I want you to start thinking about that. I want you to think about caged, how many chords are in it, and then how many pentatonic boxes there are, vertical boxes there are on the fretboard. Think about that, because there's something there. There's something not something there. There is. Think about that, and then those two concepts are related together. And when you figure that out, a lot of fun will come of that. That we'll talk about later. Anyway, next, number 2 is intro to soloing and improvisation. Right? Knowing these pentatonics and being able to do sequences is fine and dandy on its own, but you got to use it for something. If you can't use it, you're going to forget it, you're going to lose it. Right? And there's no point in learning it if you're not going to do that. So intro to soloing is this. I'm going to throw a backing track on. So The Wait's a great song for experimenting with stuff like this. It's a great key, simple chord changes, nothing crazy. It's a cool little intro lick. So this is like wedding band backing stuff. Drunk uncle up there having fun at a wedding. It's backing track. Oh, wrong key. Watch me search for videos. See if this is better. No, it's not that. It's the key of A. Great, the video's got flags, so I'm not going to make any money off of it other than the tuition fees. So, what am I doing there? Is that to begin soloing, you need to start with a certain set of parameters. If I said, hey man, just go have a hog wild, run up and down, E minor pentatonic, and just have a ball, well, that's going to sound like this. right? We have to have some sort of order and structure in this for people to hang on to for your solo, so that it makes logical sense to them. For what you do is you do a sequence, you do a guitar effect, and then time. What that means is this: I'll pick a 3-note sequence. I'm going to do hammer-ons, and I'm going to breathe and let time just kind of pass for a moment. So don't play something, just stand there, is what my teacher would say. So I put this backing track on. So a 3-note sequence. Time. So what I did there was I did 3-note sequences in a row. 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Hammer, and then time is letting it ring out. The same way when I finish this thought and again at the end of the sentence, it allows your listener to think about what was happened, and it's called phrasing. If you go to a lecture or a conference or something like that and you hear someone just go blah, 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 no breath in there, you'll look at people around you, all of a sudden everyone turned into a glazed donut and everyone just like, oh my God, this guy just shut up, right? Now if he says an important point, lets that point sink in, and now we make it a second point, that way people can kind of think, oh, that's what just happened. He's like, okay, we'll think about that, we'll take a note real quick. Soloing is the same as talking in this genre of music. If you want the fast stuff that doesn't have a break, that's called neoclassical, and that's a different animal. This animal, 3 sequences for a pattern for someone to hang on to, guitar effect to break the pattern to give some sort of interest, and then time for the listener to just sit back and think about what you did and to keep in sort of like that vocal phrasing. The same way that a good orator will have breaks in their sentences to allow everyone to think and allow to compliment what just happened. Right, and that's the beginning parts of improvisation solo. So what you do is you find a backing track. You just type in backing track in G, and a plethora will come up. You can do E minor as well. They're both the same thing. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. Work on G form for me. Divide the cage chords you have now on strings 4, 3, and 2. Practice just going up the neck with them in a nice pace, so that way you get a good feel for them. And then we'll start taking a song that you can play, or a song, we'll pick a song. I have plenty of songs in the key of G. I was thinking Almost Cut My Hair by CSNY is a great one. The Wait's a great one. Anything by Tom Petty is great. Anything by The Dead is great. Anything by Eagles is great. Because there are maybe 4 or 5 chords at most, but you can use that. The fewer chords, the better in one of these songs. If it's actually a 2-chord jam, say like China Cat Sunflower by The Dead, things like that work really well. Franklin's Tower works really well in a different key. Stuff like that works really well for this genre of music. The fewer chords, the better. That way you can get experimental moving around the neck. Awesome. Work on that for me. Fire any questions you have over to me. If not, I will see you next Friday. Take care.